Joining us now, On3's national recruiting analyst, host of the Inside Scoop, the GOAT, Josh Newberg. Josh, how we doing, brother?
I'm great, fired up about this NIL event that we're going to be hosting here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Dude, we're kind of doing some time travel right now because we're recording this on a Monday and it's airing on a Tuesday. And when the people are seeing this, when it's hitting the podcast feed, you and I are likely already sitting down and talking ball with guys like Sammy Brown, Jeremiah Smith, Dylan Raiola, number one player in the country, Dylan Stewart. Like a ton of these ballers are headed to Nashville. And I just want to kind of preface this whole event, the whole On3 NIL Elite Series event, because there's an NIL component to it, obviously. That's the point of this whole event. But the insight we're going to get to gain from these kids on their recruitment is going to be massive. What prospect fascinates you the most coming into this event that we're going to sit down with?
All of them, but mainly Dylan Raiola, I think is really interesting because he's just coming off of his commitment. So he's at a point in the process where he can maybe be a little reflective on things and maybe be a little bit open with us. But from more of an overarching view, I mean, I'm excited for the event because it's something that while NIL has been around for 2 years, it's still a little undercover behind the scenes. And it shouldn't be. It's completely legal by NCAA standards. Name, image, likeness has been around. We're going to be entering the third summer now of NIL. So what can we learn from some of these guys? Because we're not talking about a prospect, a three-star middle of the road kind of guy who might have some NIL opportunities down the road if he gets to college and he performs well and he becomes a contributor and, blah, 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 blah. The guys that we're going to be dealing with, they are in it. They are living it. They are on the edge of all the new things that are happening in NIL. I'm eager to hear the realities of it. We hear so much rumors, but what are the realities of it? Like, what are some of the good things that NIL does for student athletes? What are some of the downfalls? What are some of the lies that are told? What are some of the benefits of this new NIL era? I just want to hear from top recruits that are actually living some of the things that we talk about so often on our channels, and really the whole country talks about NIL. And we're going to have an opportunity to sit down with some of the most knowledgeable people in the business, some of the top recruits in the industry, and it's going to be a massive learning experience for everybody there.
Really quickly, make sure you're subscribed right here. Josh Newberg, the man, the myth, legend. I already told you, national recruiting analyst for On3. He's got a show that comes out multiple times a week, The Inside Scoop, going to keep you in the know for all things involving the lifeblood of college football, that is recruiting. But Josh, you hit it on the head, dude. Like, it's a thing that when it first started, the NIL, that is, a lot of people were kind of bashful, and it just kind of was a thing that wasn't, super out there for a lot of people. And now it's getting to the point where us here at On3, we got the NIL valuations for a lot of these kids that are, to my understanding and to everybody's understanding here, like pretty much as close as we can be to dictating these kids' value when it comes to the NIL market. And a lot of these kids too are, I think, starting to realize that you can be more and more outspoken about how that impacts your recruitment. It is a thing that factors in. Heck, it should factor in. If you have money that can, change your current standing in life, like, of course that should factor into your college decision. Now, should it be the whole decision? Should it be the whole, piece of the pie? Whole nother conversation, but I'm excited to talk to these kids as well, Josh. You mentioned Dylan Raiola, and he is one of several Georgia Bulldog commits. He's one of 2 quarterback commits for the Dogs headed to Nashville. Is this going to just be like a recruiting playground for some of those cats? Because I'm thinking you got several of your future teammates at this event, and then also you got some of the top targets like KJ Bolden, Jeremiah Smith. You expect the Dogs to be active on the recruiting trail even at this event, Josh?
Sammy Brown.
I
mean, the list goes, Jeremiah Smith, the list goes on. I didn't really think of it in terms of that. I think that a lot of the prospects are going to come here just to learn, but one of the unintended consequences of getting a lot of great players around each other is that peer-to-peer recruiting that takes place. It's inevitable. Anytime these guys get together, because they are friends, they've come up on the 7-on-7 circuit, they've been to camps, they've been to combines together, some since maybe they were in 8th grade, maybe even younger than that. So anytime that you get these great players on campus, they're able to bond a little bit more and more with each other because they do kind of breathe a rare air. There's only so many 5-stars. There's only so many 4-stars. But there's tens of thousands of high school athletes, but only a handful kind of deal with or go through some of the trials and tribulations that players in the top 50, players in the top 30 go through. So I do think that there's going to be some peer-to-peer recruiting going on. I mean, that's not why the event's taking place, but it's inevitable.
I mean, peer-to-peer recruiting has to be up there with your relationship with your coaching staff. I mean, these are guys that you're going to bleed, sweat, and cry with throughout the rest of your 3 to 5 years and one of the most formative times of your life. So I would absolutely expect, just like you were mentioning, like it's inevitable that if I'm Dylan Raiola and maybe I'm sitting next to Sammy Brown in one of the sessions and I'm maybe like nudging him a couple times and saying, hey, come with me to Athens. Dylan Stewart, number 1 player in the country. You and I are going to sit down with him. That interview will be on this channel, so make sure you're subscribed. What are you hoping to learn from him in regards to his recruitment?
Well, he's taken a lot of trips so far, mostly unofficial, and he's going to hit the road in June for 4 official visits. He said that he would like to make a decision before his senior year, whether that comes in early September or late August. Nothing set in stone with that, but it does sound like he is narrowing the field and coming down to a decision. Now, what I want to know from Dylan Stewart is what it's been like. What trip unofficially has stood out to him? What are some of the things that he is hearing about NIL on the recruiting trail? Is he being fed some lies? Can he kind of see through it and understand where the truth comes from? And what are some of these opportunities that maybe teams are offering? I think Dylan Stewart's in a unique position, not only because he's number 1 overall, but he plays the edge position, a premier position, much like Dylan Raiola on the offensive side of the ball. You look at what goes on the trenches and the defensive side of the ball, and that's kind of where a lot of teams are allocating their NIL money, whether that be in the transfer portal, whether that be out of high school. NIL is focused on a lot of the big men in the trenches, and Dylan Stewart, number 1 edge overall. I can't wait to get here, for him to get here, and us to be able to pick his brain on his recruitment. Only about 2.5 months left of his recruitment.
Kind of coming down to the wire there for a 1 Dylan Stewart. I'm fascinated to see what his conversation is around that timeline, because it sounded like that was going to be the case, but you never know with the wild world that is recruiting. Things tend to change at the drop of a hat. So I'm excited to talk to him, Josh. Now, another edge, 5-star plus player, Colin Simmons. He's got some visits lined up. If you're reading the tea leaves there, he's visiting LSU in November for that game against Florida. So you would expect maybe it goes close to that early signing period. But I was really fascinated, Josh. He's got LSU for a game visit, and he's got Bama for their game week 2 against Texas. Now, Texas also obviously very much in the hunt for Colin Simmons. Is there any extra wow factor that goes into a official visit during a game week in your mind? What's the significance of that for Colin Simmons?
There's extra wow factor just in Colin Simmons, in his recruitment, in his highlight tape. He is the wow factor. So for him to come in and talk NIL, I'm really excited. I know that's not what you asked me, but I'm just excited to talk to Colin Simmons about it. Now, Colin Simmons was on the Inside Scoop a couple weeks ago. And to your point about his visit coming in the fall, I don't think Colin Simmons is in decision mode. So we're going to contrast his recruitment to a guy like Dylan Stewart. I expect Colin Simmons, who's far from a decision, maybe to come in a little bit lighter, some jokes, some laughter, because he's not narrowing the focus. It gets hard when you got to eliminate teams. You're calling up some great programs, some great coaches, and saying, Coach, thanks, but no thanks. And I think when you start doing that, and I don't think Colin Simmons has yet, I think it kind of makes things a little bit more real, a little bit more serious. You are making a monster decision. And a recruit always comes to that point where recruiting is fun and you're just soaking it all up. You're listening to everybody. You're joyous. And then things start to get real. When you feel that the ink is about to hit the paper, you are making a life choice, things get a little bit more serious. And I don't think Colin Simmons is there yet, but he's going to be, and I'm looking forward to just talking to him. He's another one of those big trench guys, premier position. And I know you said Alabama and LSU, but I had Jerry Hamilton from Inside Texas on the Inside Scoop just last week. Do not sleep on Texas, the in-state team. Colin Simmons plays at Powerhouse Duncanville High School there in Texas. So don't sleep on Texas, but I do agree with you. LSU has been trending throughout the spring.
I mean, Jerry Hamilton came out and said as so much as, hey, Colin Simmons is in that category of like a must get for the Longhorns. And I think what you said was right on the money, Josh, where Colin Simmons is kind of in like this dating phase of his recruitment. Like, it's fun to go on dates and get to know each other and figure out, if you're compatible or not. But then there comes a time where it's like, hey, what are we? We got to DTR this thing. And it seems like Colin Simmons is enjoying the dating phase, but eventually there will be that DTR portion of the relationship. Is Colin Simmons a must get for Texas, Josh?
Yeah. He's not going to make or break the class, but when you take the temperature of recruiting at Texas, yes, I think for this class, he's very important. He's massively important. Texas has recruited well, obviously at quarterback, Micah Hudson at wide receiver. They got some guys on the board that are really solid, but the trenches is where it's going to be won and lost for Coach Sark, and he needs to land Colin Simmons in this class.
Josh, two more guys I want to talk to you about. One being Sammy Brown, fresh off the official visit to Tennessee, along with some other high-profile unofficial visits. Where does his recruitment stand right now? Sounds like a lot of buzz around Georgia and Clemson. Can Tennessee kind of get their foot in the door here?
I think Tennessee did get their foot in the door by getting him in on this official visit, but when we look in the rearview mirror after the month of June's over, and he's taken official visits to Clemson, and he's gone to Georgia, and he's gone to Ohio State, I think we're going to kind of look back at this and say, oh, yeah, I remember he did visit Tennessee. While it was a great opportunity for them to get him on campus, I think Sammy Brown's recruitment, the 5-star linebacker out of Georgia, is going to come down to either Clemson or Georgia. I think Ohio State is maybe the sleeper pick. I think Tennessee, hey, look, JD, there's teams from California to Florida trying to get him on campus for these officials, and he settled on 4 or 5, and the ones that he took are massively important. I think Tennessee's in the hunt, but when we look back on it, when he's ready to make this decision in early to mid-July, I think the Tennessee visit is just going to be a little far back in that rearview mirror, and Sammy Brown, I think, ultimately come down to 2 teams, Georgia or Clemson.
This is one of those guys, Josh, where you and I talked about it earlier. A lot of Georgia commits kind of rubbing their hands together, looking at Sammy Brown and saying, oh, yeah, we're going to be in your ear all week long about coming to Athens with us. This is also a big recruitment for a lot of the barbers in Clemson, South Carolina, and Athens, Georgia. I'm sure they're also watching this one with bated breath, so we'll get more intel for them on the potential status of that mullet for Sammy Brown. Last guy I want to talk to you about, Josh, we're talking about Georgia targets. Ohio State commit number 1 wide receiver in the 24 cycle, Jeremiah Smith. Yeah. He's committed to Ohio State. I just said it. But also still has some visits to be taken. The Dogs are in the mix there. Florida's in the mix there. He's got a visit to Penn State in the mix there. What's the latest on Jeremiah Smith, and what are we hoping to learn from sitting down with him?
Well, if you ask Jeremiah Smith what's going on, he'll just tell you, hey, he's just checking out the process. This is just part of his decision. He's committed to Ohio State, but, hey, this is the recruiting process, right? I don't know. Jeremiah Smith was at Georgia last weekend. He's going to be at Florida for an official visit this weekend. He's going to probably take a couple more official visits. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends back up at Georgia. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends up taking an official to Florida State, maybe even Miami. They've been involved with him as well. He says he's solidly committed to Ohio State. That's something that we're certainly going to ask him when he gets there. And hey, as a wide receiver, it's really hard to turn down Ohio State. But as the number 1 wide receiver in America, he has some leverage. And if he wants to go check out some other schools while he, waits until this recruiting cycle kind of carries on, hey, he can punch his ticket anywhere he wants to go. There's not much Ohio State can really say. Jeremiah Smith, as I said, is saying the right things when asked about his commitment. He says, I'm committed. I'm just checking out some of these options, some of these teams that are recruiting me just in case. And there's nothing wrong with that. He has every right to do so. But if you're an Ohio State fan and you remember that Dylan Raiola also decommitted from Ohio State and lands at Georgia, and Georgia's one of the teams that are recruiting him, and Dylan Raiola is a 5-star. He's the number 1 quarterback in America. There is some reason to be concerned. Not saying that I would put him on flip watch just yet, but Jeremiah Smith, hey, he's looking at his options. We're going to see him at the recruiting event, at the NIL event, and we're going to ask him just about that.
No, we're still together. We're still exclusive, but I might play the field just a little bit. So, I think it draws at least the conversation, but I'm with you, Josh. I think he's well within his right to take the visits and go through the recruiting process. I mean, he's going to be a rising senior. He's a rising senior. Like, he's still got his whole senior year ahead of him, and this is a big decision for him. Josh, I appreciate all your time. Before we get you out of here, anybody else we should keep an eye on that's headed to this On3 NIL Elite Series?
Well, late addition was Brandon Baker, the #1 offensive tackle in America. Anytime we can get a #1 player at their position, especially what we've been talking about with the trenches, so like a Colin Stewart, like a Dylan Stewart, like a Colin Simmons or a Dylan Stewart, Brandon Baker has that much value on the offensive side of the ball. So I think it'd be interesting to hear. He's from California. You know, are any brands approaching him? What does he look for in the NIL process or in a school? So, yeah, getting Brandon Baker all the way from California to fly into Nashville, Tennessee, I think that'll be really cool to see.
From Mater Dei High School, which has a pipeline to USC. So that'll be a lot of fun to sit down with him. Josh, appreciate all your time. Y'all, if you haven't yet, follow Josh on Twitter. Subscribe right here. Watch the Inside Scoop. Do it for yourself. Do it for your health, to stay in the know, for the lifeblood that is college football, that is recruiting. Josh, appreciate you, man. We'll do this live tomorrow.
All right, see you soon, JD.
Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.